Hey guys, Sam Terrell, the Northwest Aeronaut. Welcome back. Today we are talking about where we should be looking when we're coming into land. Let's get in the air. Alright guys, so one of the biggest problems student pilots have when they're learning to land is to figure out how high they are above the runway. And so much of that has to do with where your eyeballs are while you're coming in on approach. Now, your CFI has probably told you need to be looking at the end of the runway, down the runway at the very end. And that's absolutely true. You need to be looking down the runway. Some of the biggest problems people have are when they get fixated on the point right in front of them, they end up hitting the ground too early, hitting that nose wheel, or sometimes maybe they round out too early and then they're 10 feet in the air when they stall and come down hard. But I go one step further. We're not just going to be looking down at the end of the runway. As you're coming in on approach, we want to be looking to the sides of the runway. We want to be looking at the taxiways. We want to be looking at if there's any trees, looking at the tops of the trees. If there's any hangars or buildings, look at the tops of the hangars. But keeping our eyes moving side to side, because ultimately that is what's going to give you the best depth perception of how high you are above the ground. This is especially true at nighttime because your depth perception goes out the window at night. But even during the daytime, and especially as you're learning, looking to the sides will give you great depth perception to know how high you are above the ground, and the more comfortable you get with your airplane to know where your wheels are, the more you'll be able to know exactly when those tires are about to touch the ground. So we're going to do a little exercise that I do with all my students called slow flight down the runway. We are going to get down over the runway, and our job is to fly as close to the runway as possible without touching. All right? McMinnville traffic, 66589ers, the left base, 22, low approach only, McMinnville. So slow flight down the runway, we're going to use partial flaps for this. And today, because it's windy, we're only going to use about 10 degrees of flaps. Our approach speed will be a little faster. You've got to use power in this case. You've got to use enough power to maintain your altitude above the runway. You've got to use it to make sure you don't sink too much and touch the ground. But while we're doing this, we're going to keep our eyes moving. Not just at the end of the runway, but side to side. We're going to be looking at the sides of the runway. All right, final's clear. We're going to do 10 degrees of flaps here. McMinnville traffic, 66589ers, final, 22, low approach only, and we'll be remaining in the pattern, McMinnville. All right, we got a good wind today. So right now, as we're turning final, already, I'm looking at the sides, just moving my eyes to side. We're going to land and hang out here for a second. Now, we're still a little far out for it to do us much good, but we're just getting in the practice. We're getting in the habit of having our eyes moving. Because the worst thing you can do is fixate on any one point. Alright, so as we get closer here, I'm looking at the taxiway, I'm looking at the grass on either side of the runway, I'm looking at the lights, like the lights of the PAPI, or the runway edge lights, the ILS antenna, I'm looking at the top of that, I'm looking at these trees. All of these things are going to give us a better idea of how high we are above the ground. Alright, we're coming in over the center line here.
McMinnville traffic, helicopter 03 Lima, right downwind.
And we're just flying as close as we can without touching. Without touching. Using power as needed to keep ourselves afloat. And we're holding that center line. Looking side to side, you can see exactly how high you are. I can come down a little bit more. Can come down a little more, but not too much. Ooh, ooh, ooh. There we go. Just holding it as close as we can without touching. Now look, I can do a little touch and go if I want to. I can just let that tire come down nice and gently. I won't even touch the nose wheel. I'm just going to let the tires come down nice and gently. Just a little tap and go. A little tap and go. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. There's our tap and go. All right. And then we're going to go full power. We're going to get back in the air. And we're going to go around. All right. There we go. We got our good flap speed. We'll take our flaps back up.
McMinnville traffic, 66589ers, departure leg 22, making left close traffic, McMinnville. McMinnville traffic.
So this is an exercise that I do with all of my students when they are learning how to land. Before we ever do any landings at all, we do slow flight down the runway because it allows them to get used to what the airplane feels like in that slow flight configuration and how they're going to control it and what the sight picture looks like out the window to be aligned with the center line and to know how high above the ground they actually are. So now that we've kind of figured out what it looks like and feels like, we can then use those skills for our spot landings, like for our normal or our short field landing on our check ride, because you'll know exactly where your tires are at all times. So today, we're going to try to set down on the beginning of the second stripe after the numbers. All right, so as we come into land here, we're going to keep our eyes moving side to side. We're going to be looking at the grass, the taxiways, the trees, the antennas, anything around the runway, because it gives context to the size of the runway. When you're just looking at a runway in an isolated manner, you have no idea if that runway is 150 feet wide, 100 feet wide, 30 feet wide. So by looking at items around the runway, it gives you a better sense of how big that runway is, and thereby how high above it you are. And again, because it's so windy, we're going to do this with just 10 degrees of flaps. I'm not going to use any more than that. Flaps, you got to remember, are a tool. They are simply a tool, and if you don't have need for that tool, you shouldn't be using it. All right, already I'm looking to side, looking at the grass, looking at the taxiways, looking at the PAPI lights, the windsock, the antenna. Give me an idea of how high I am above this runway. All right, here we go. All the way to the second stripe. Letting it down, and it looks like we're floating a bit. That's okay. We're floating because we got a lot of wind, but here we go. There's my tire down right there. All right. Okay. Lots of helicopters out today. I see 4 in my line of sight right now. Okay, guys. Hopefully, from that landing, you don't take away that I went past the spot. That wasn't the point of the video. The point is, I knew exactly where my tires were, and I knew exactly when that tire was going to touch the ground. Had that been a check ride and I needed to hit that spot, I would have gone around, right? Remember, you can always go around. But I hope this video has been helpful in telling you where you should be looking when you come into land. Hopefully these techniques will help you understand how high above the ground you are, and practice that slow flight down the runway. It really goes a long way to helping your situational awareness and knowing exactly how high above the pavement you are. Appreciate you spending time with me today, guys. If you found value in this video, please share it with your friends. And until next time, resume your own navigation. See ya.